So without further ado, please give a warm remote welcome to both Bronson and Zak. Bronson, I'm turning it over to you.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I'm Bronson Allred. I'm from South Central Iowa. I'm mostly a row crop farmer, corn and soybeans. We raise a little bit of small grains, wheat and rye, a little bit of feeder calves every once in a while. But we're wanting to explore options of expanding into the cattle industry a little bit more, using our row crop acres, utilizing cover crops and stuff. So I'm wanting to explore that a little bit with Zak here, and we'll see what we can figure out.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zak Kennedy. We operate south of Atlantic, Iowa in Cass County. My family includes my wife, Emily, and my brother Mitch, and I all own Kennedy Cattle Company down here. We're a feedlot, cow-calf, backgrounder, as well as raising row crops and hay, and we've been doing the cover crop deal here for quite a while, and I'm by no means an expert, but I've done some dumb things and I've done some things that worked out pretty good. So I'm more than willing to share, and hopefully somebody gets some good out of it today.
Alrighty, well, I've got a list of questions here for you, Zak. Most of these are stuff I come up with on my own, and then also some questions that I hear from other producers that I consult with occasionally that I'm wanting to kind of help get into the using cover crops more for their cattle operations. So first question I had was, what about fencing? So the biggest one big pushback I see on this is everybody says that you have to have a perimeter fence around where you're doing this. So do you feel that that's true, or can you get by with just electric fence?
We run kind of a combination of all the above. Some aren't very shiny, some's brand new 6-barb, some's a single strand hot wire. I think you really have to look at every situation individually, because if it's a farm you've really got some long-term ideas of being able to hold on to, maybe it's own ground or family ground or a long-term relationship, you can probably go ahead and spend a little money and get some wood posts in there at a minimum, and maybe you put in a couple hot wires and with barbed wire or whatnot, and then on the other deals that are maybe just a short-term deal, you're just going to maybe graze them from October to December 1st, depending on what kind of cattle you've got around. You could probably get by with a good hot fencer and a single strand around the perimeter, but you can't walk away from it either. You've got to be checking it pretty religiously too. Fence
Sure.
is a big cost. You've got to really weigh that out.
Sure. So that kind of ties into our second question. Is this something that you do mostly on your ground that you own, or do you do some on some of your rented property too?
So we'll do it on anything that there's an opportunity to do it, and if the landlord will let us, or a neighboring farmer or whatever else. We do our own ground, our own company-owned ground every year, have since 2012 when we got started on this. It just makes sense, to really first and foremost get us the benefit as the owner, and then as we've figured some things out and we've tried to move on and do it on other farms. We'll also just run the corn stalks on the neighbor's farm, just because maybe had some corn go down or whatever. So we try to be as flexible as we can to get as much good out of it as we can. And I'm hoping that as we go ahead, more of our neighbors and friends see that this is working, and maybe they'll go ahead and see the benefit by letting us run some cattle on their land, if they're willing to get some covers seeded out there. And I think that kind of fits in a little bit with what you're trying to do down there as well.
Mm-hmm. So when you say benefits, do you think that you're getting the most benefit as a cash flow standpoint by getting your livestock out there to graze something, or are you seeing more of a benefit to soil health, or a little bit of both? Or
Well, Bronson, I'd really say it all goes together. It's hand in hand. I try to look at the money first. I've got to figure out how to pay for it. I got a mortgage, and I got kids to feed, so I've got to make some money at what we're doing. But as we've done this going along, we're also seeing the extra benefits, because we're still getting the cover out there, and, we're using primarily cereal rye, use a little wheat here and there, just depends, but we're getting the benefit of what the cover does for the ground, but we're also putting the cattle out there, so they're recycling those nutrients right back in. And I think long-term, that's, probably a little hard for me to just exactly point my finger to and say, well, it's this benefit, but I think they all kind of mesh together.
Sure. What's your primary source of water on your crop ground that you're grazing cover crops on?
So a combination, anything you can imagine, if they can water out of it, they have. We have developed some water. Years ago, my folks had put in a water line through an equip project back in, I don't know, probably early 2000s anyway. And what we did there is we actually tapped into that water line and built permanent structures, poured concrete, put big water tanks out there, and then we just farm around it. And because we knew that, that's our farm. We just as well, if we're going to put a little money in it, let's do it on our farm first and see how it works. We've also developed some tile line type of structures. You fence off the tile line and go down a little ways just to make a watering access. You wouldn't want to do that with a huge amount of stock, but if your stock pretty light, it'll sure work. And then there's places where there's a building site, maybe we can let them on up into a lot to water or whatever else. But I'm not a big fan of watering out of ponds, especially in the winter. There's a lot of risk that goes in that. And you've got to be careful with cricks and things like that too, for the same standpoint of what a watering out of a pond can be is if, you get some stream bank degradation, but you may also get a place where it's hard for them to water. And, if cows or calves or whatever get thirsty for long enough and there's not snow, they're going to go looking for it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So you kind of already mentioned it earlier, but what species are you mostly seeding? I know you mentioned rye and a little bit of wheat. Is there anything else that you guys have experimented with?
Yeah, the cereal rye is our go-to. It's aggressive. It's a good grower. It kind of fits us well. I see no reason that anything would work. Oats, for some quick, nice fall grazing. Wheat is fine. Triticale. When we started, the first year we did it, we used the radishes and the turnips and everything else. And it was the perfect year. 2012 was the perfect year for that to happen because we had long growing season. We had them in early, and they were huge and a lot of feed, a lot of feed out of it. Mm-hmm. Where we struggle with it is I like to drill them in. I like seed to soil contact, so I like my crops to be drilled in. I'm not going to say that you can't get a heck of a nice stand with aerial application, but like I said, for us, the cereal rye is it's not terribly expensive and just sure seems to work good for us.
Yep. Okay.
One other thought about that though is it comes on so strong in the spring that you're going to get some really nice, as soon as it warms up, you get that first really nice warm rain, hopefully in March. But when you get that first warm rain, that stuff is just, man, it's aggressive and gets going, and you'll have more feed than you know what to do with, depending on how you're stocked in that early spring period too.
Yep. Would you recommend any other species besides rye for you mentioned oats. Would oats be a better fit for fall grazing?
I think I like what I see out of the oats in the fall. Obviously they terminate with the weather, but depending on how a guy could set it up, maybe you do a patch of oats here or there, and then you can kind of rotate yourself through a system. Move the cows or the calves, whatever you got running around. You can move them on, and after they've got the goodie off of it, then move them on.
Sure.
But as a for a more full season type of deal, you need something that's going to overwinter.
Yep. Okay. Well, again, you kind of mentioned your seeding method already. You prefer to drill. Have you guys had much success at all with trying any aerial seeding or any other forms of seeding?
I've seen some great success here locally with some folks that have flown things on with an airplane or a helicopter. We did use a helicopter one year, and I don't know. I wasn't super satisfied with it because at that point, I really had to have every acre covered to make sure I was getting some feed out of it from a cow herd. So we weren't farming much ground at all at that point, and we really needed everything. So I actually went in and went and got the county's little no-till drill that folks use for CRP plantings and whatnot. And I actually drilled in, I don't know, 6 or 8 acres on one farm because I wasn't satisfied with the stand. But there again, if you're a little further away from home or whatever else, and time's a constraint, maybe you guys can get out there and, when the beans are dropping leaves or the corn's starting to turn color, go ahead and get something seeded out there. I see it as a very viable option. I do.
Sure. Do you mostly seed after harvest or like after corn silage? You take off silage or something, or have you done any experimenting with interseeding like middle of summer?
We haven't. Actually, I shouldn't say that 100%. I went out with a 5-gallon bucket and threw some stuff on the ground just to see what happened. And it came. Generally, how we look at it, we're running a feed yard operation too. So actually, like this year, we were picking wet corn and we had to shut the combine off to go cut silage because of how my rotation works at home. We don't plant our corn silage till about the 1st of June. You get the cattle off. We may harvest a little rye and then plant corn silage back in. So I'm on the horn as soon as I can with I have a custom operator do it all for me. And I want him there. Hopefully, I hope to see him chasing the chopper out of the field. I really do. I want every opportunity for any extra day of growth we get before winter sets in is that much more good that we get. So we do that. And then he's going to be chasing the combine around too, as much as we can. And like I said, for us, maybe I'm a little gun shy after what I saw that time on my own situation with the aerial. So we've, like I said, we've been drilling it ever since.
Yeah.
I really like that seed to soil contact, and a year like this, it was so dry, but we got a pretty good stand out of everything because we were able to, we had a few showers here and there through the fall, but we were able to get that stuff sprouted. And once it's sprouted, it's going to be good to go.
Yep. Okay. Have you ever had any years where you've been able to utilize your cover crops clear through the winter grazing, or has it always been where you run out and you have to pull them off or you get too much snow?
There's going to be those years, and that comes down to pure management. You've got to read what's going on. I always say you need to have plan B, C, and hopefully not D, but you better have an idea. We've had some tough winters through this part of the world. I think the further south you go, the more opportunity you've got to do it. But so you've got several things that go into that question. You've got stocking rate. Obviously, what kind of winter are you going to get? Can you get enough growth out of it? I always like that. We always have a lot of feed around just in case. I mean, we've all seen those winters. I think it was 2009. Winter basically set in the first part of December and never left. We fed cows every day all that winter. It was just, the snow was deep and there was just a lot of it. And, that's part of what we go through living in the upper Midwest. But, like 2012, I grazed those cattle clear to the first of the year and there was still feed out there. It was the perfect deal. It was seeded early and we had a long fall that year. I mean, we were still pouring concrete on the day before Thanksgiving. So if you get if the stars align for you, there's no reason you couldn't. I'll say that the opportunity is there, but it still comes down to you've got to kind of manage it on your side and know that, hey, these cattle are getting a little short on feed or they're working the fences. We better get something else out here.
Yeah. Maybe this varies based on whether it's cows or calves, but what do you guys generally use for a stocking density when you're grazing cover crops?
So in the spring, we'll run it pretty hard on cows. I'm not afraid to put a couple per acre out there. Now you got to remember that's awful wet feed. There's a lot of water going through every biteful. Mm-hmm. So we'll usually maybe supplement with some 3rd or 4th cut and alfalfa. Those cows are going to be nursing calves, so they need some pretty pretty nutrient dense feeds, and that helps slow it down. You know, they need some dry matter in their guts, otherwise it's going in one end and right back out the other.
Yep.
You know, as far as turning calves out, we're not afraid to run it pretty hard, but we also know in the back of our head that we're going to have to be feeding them at some point. And the cattle will tell you when they need fed, especially a calf. You know, when they quit being happy out there, you're going to have to get some feed in front of them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think everybody's got a different goal, you know, as far as what they want for a gain, or you know, as a set of cows, we're just trying to be as cheap an operator as possible on the feed side. That, you know, I think everybody, you know, I always say math's hard, but if you sit down with a piece of paper and pencil and a good calculator, you're gonna get it figured out what's going to be best in your world.
Yeah. What have you guys ever tested or checked to see what your calves gained when they were grazing cover crops?
I've not personally, Bronson. What I see, you know, I could estimate probably pretty close. And I don't think it's out of this world to get a pound and a half gain if you've got the feed there. You know, they've got to have all they want, and it's got to be the right calf. It can't be a little creep feed, you know, fresh off of mama, you know, fleshy kind of Iowa calf that we get in October. You know, it's going to take almost a yearling to pull that off, and we see that when we graze our pastures too with yearlings, that it takes a bigger, harder, agier kind of animal to pull off the big gains. But that being said, sometimes gain isn't the whole goal. You know, you're working yourself into a different market. So maybe you have a set of, say, 5 weight calves that you put together, you know, in December timeframe, get them weaned out, get them turned out. You're not after huge gains. You're looking for a calf that has the ability to go to a grass market, you know, in March, April, and May. He's going to be green. He's going to be sized up. He's going to be pretty hardy. And where you're gaining your money or the profitability is in the value of that animal has increased, even though his size has not increased tremendously. It's his value per hundredweight that's gained. Or a set of cows the same way. You know, you're just, like I said, you're more trying to excuse me, you're more trying to get your cost per head per day down, because let's face it, it's feed costs in a cow herd that makes it or breaks it. It's not how big your calves are. It's what's it cost you to run that cow per year, whether you're gonna make any money with it or not.
Yep. Have you guys ever sampled your cover crop biomass for nutrient value to see what's out there and what you can utilize?
So, well, excuse me. So, for example, this year we chopped some of the rye. I knew it. I'm sorry, folks. This year we did chop our rye. I'm big on testing feed stuffs through the feed yard. You got to know what you got to manage it. Our protein levels were you know, kind of up around 14. That stuff was headed out. You know, it basically was a really nice first cut and alfalfa kind of feed. We did make a little baleage too, because the stuff had come on so nice that what we actually did is we baled it and put it in a tube and, you know, wrapped it up, and that stuff's almost 18% protein. It wasn't as headed out because there had been cattle running on it, so it was a little further back in development, but it was just awesome feed. I was very pleased. It's potent stuff. I did put a little nitrogen down and a little sulfur, and I think that probably helped. I mean, it couldn't hurt, I guess. But yeah, I think it's good stuff.
Sure. What's your thoughts on when you're grazing? What's your thoughts on compaction, and what do you guys do to manage that?
Personally, I think the compaction idea is probably a little overblown in some circles. You know, those roots do a lot for us for getting down and breaking up that compaction, and you'll see it if you go pull a root ball up and look at what it's doing for you. It's not a big deal. I will say though that if you're feeding them, and you know, there's going to be some areas around water, the high traffic areas, that they're gonna do some compaction, but I don't see it any different than 1,000 bushel grain cart or 1,300 bushel grain cart running around out there, and whatever, the biggest combine running around weighs full of corn. I mean, it's probably not a lot different, really. Some of those areas where, if you want to call them a sacrifice area, I guess, where you're feeding or, maybe putting hay bales out or whatever. We'll go in. This year we used a Kraus accelerator, and we were only in about maybe half or 3/4 of an inch, just trying to smooth it up a little bit. I didn't want to go deep, and I don't care to go deep. I don't think I need to, but just trying to even it up a little bit. So get rid of the cow paths basically, and the hoof prints. Those hoof prints do hold water. In a year like this, probably didn't hurt.
Right. What do you guys do for spring termination? Do you plant into it green or kill earlier, or how do you guys manage that?
Generally, we end up planting it green, like I said, this year we chopped some, baled some, and I was in planting it 2 days later, and we sprayed it, another day later after that. Well, some of it actually was sprayed the same day. The sprayer chased me out of the field. But, my thing is, as it gets older, it's easier to kill, for one thing. One thing I've learned is our higher productivity kind of ground will handle about anything we throw at it. We can plant it green, big. It's pretty high organic matter to start with. I think where you got to, or maybe you could get to playing with fire a little bit, is on a real low organic, low fertility type of ground, clay side hills, things like that, where you let it get too big, it can be a little hard to kill. And then that's where I think the nitrogen is probably a bigger deal, getting enough nitrogen to it to get that crop off to a good start. And I'm always looking at it from corn. We do plant a lot of corn. Soybeans, I think you can about do anything you want and you're going to be fine. They're pretty forgiving.
Yeah, you brought up soybeans. I'm going to go back a little bit here. Do you guys, do you drill any cover crops after soybean harvest, or even,
we do.
Obviously you don't interseed much, but anything in crop or?
So after soybeans, in my mind, soybeans are kind of yes, they're pretty good rotation crop that does fit in a traditional cash grain operation. Fully agreed. They're pretty hard on the ground though, in my mind. So I really like to see soybeans followed up with a cover crop of some sort. Just get something out there. That ground washes a lot easier. I mean, you just look at the biomass difference. It's just there's nothing there compared to chasing behind. If you had, say, 60 bushel soybean yields, and then your corn yield right across the fence is 200. Well, there's a heck of a lot of difference there in biomass that's out there. So I do like to see that, and we'll plant. Last year I planted right into, it was wheat on that particular field. Pulled anhydrous through it. Planted corn 2 weeks later, and the stuff was probably up, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 inches, and killed easy. It looked great. It was actually my best yielding farm this year.
Yeah. Yep. So if a person wanted to start doing this, what kind of an operation would you say would be the best, as far as like background cattle, cow calf pair? What would be the best starter program for a person to look at?
I guess, as I think about it, getting started, it's no different than starting with cover crops. You want to start small, work into it, get comfortable with what's going on and how to manage it and everything else. So I'm going to say the same thing about the cattle side of it, trying to run cattle on it. Probably the way I'm going to look at it, if I'm sitting on your side, I'm going to probably try to find a neighbor or somebody in the area that runs a lot of cows and maybe has to start feeding early or whatever, doesn't have enough place to winter them. And I'm going to see if I can custom winter some cows for somebody. Build into it a little bit that way. And as you get more comfortable, then you can decide, you know what, I'm going to own these myself. That way I'm not trying to say that in a derogatory way at all, but it's low risk. It's a little bit on somebody else's dime. You still got to you still got to perform. You got to do everything that you agree you're going to do, but it gives you a chance and it gives you an out. So it gets to be the middle of December and it's terrible. We got blizzards and everything else. And you can call that guy and say, here's the deal, you know, we're not gonna be able to graze anymore. You know, I'll put out hay bales for you, or do you want me to send them home? You know, and that way you can kind of step into it a little bit. Don't go crazy and go overboard and have too much going on. And then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed and you don't want to ever do it again because you didn't have good experience with it. You know, I don't know your exact operation and how it's set up, but, you know, maybe there's no reason that you can't, you know, turn out 40 or 60 or 80 head of calves, you know, on your home 160 or 240, whatever you got there close. You know, somewhere where it's right in your backyard, you can really keep a really good idea of what's going on with those cattle every day. But my thing is to kind of go slow, figure it out, and see what works before you really jump in. And, you know, I've seen deals, you know, not necessarily on this, where, you know, guys they kind of got burned on the first year for whatever reason, and that was it. They're done, even though it's a perfectly good thing to do.
Yep. Do you guys on your finished cattle, do you guys finish any cattle on cover crops, or do you just grow them to yearlings and then finish them on grain? Or
Yep. So we are, as far as that goes, a traditional feedlot operation in that aspect. I will say though that you know, the cattle that I've got running out on stocks right now, yeah, they're getting fed. There's nothing out there. I mean, they laid waste to it. It was good stuff and they liked it. But those cattle are getting staged is what they are. So those cattle start coming in the spring and then hitting the feedlot pens. And basically we're making our own yearlings is what we're doing. Some of those are on a custom basis. They'll go to another feed yard. They won't stay at my place. But in my mind, it's another tool in our box that we can stage these cattle instead of bringing in a 500 or 600 pound calf in October, November, when everybody's got one. We can stretch that calf out pretty cheap, and then he can hit the feed yard and finish, you know, for next fall's kind of market.
so do you guys see better gains or healthier calves on calves going into your feedlot that's been on covers versus, you know, growing them on grain or something?
Health is the big deal. Those cattle will be healthy. They're going to be stretched out. You know, they've had a little hard weather on their back. And it's good for them. You know, God gave them hair for a reason. Now that along with that, you're keeping them cleaner than if they're in a feedlot pen and you're having to bed them every third day or whatever the situation is. So they stay clean, you know, and we've seen the situation too, where we've backgrounded a set of calves and just, you know, the market was telling us to sell the calves the 1st of February, say, and you come wheeling into one of the biggest sale barns in the state of Iowa with the only calves that are clean and they're open haired. They got hair like grizzly bears. And you know what? Maybe they're not as good a quality as Joe Blow's calves that just come through the ring. But when you sell them for 400 higher, that made you some money.
Yeah.
You know, they're well received, I guess is what I'm saying. They're turned out. They're healthy. It works pretty good in that regard.
Yep. Well, that's I guess we kind of zipped through that. That's about all I got for now. But
Well, Bronson, so let's go to a couple questions from
Okay.
the chat. And I just want to remind the listeners, we still have 30 minutes. So like, let's ask a bunch more questions. But let's start with this. This is a question for Zak. So Wade asked, seeding after combining, so you know, chasing the combine with the seeder, it doesn't give much or any fall grazing. Can you speak to the fall grazing you get with that?
So I really think it's situation dependent. You know, are you at Marshalltown, Iowa? Are you at Kossuth County, Iowa? Or are you in Ringgold County, Iowa, or Cass County? You know, we see some decent growth. I'm not going to say it's just astounding and there's 4 tons of feed out there. Our situation in particular, you know, we plant a pretty short season bean and we plant it early. So we're usually cutting beans pretty early. And then on the corn, you know, either it's our corn silage or our wet corn harvest, you know, we're picking corn at 35%. So actually a lot of those stalks are still pretty green. So that's where it works for us in that regard. I can definitely see as you get further north and your growing season is just how much less, you know, that and it's not a perfect system by any means. It's really not. Every year's different. You know, you get a wet year where you can hardly get into pick corn gonna be pretty hard to seed anything, and that is the perfect year, or the perfect scenario to put that stuff out, fly it on, whatever you can do that way.
Thanks, Zach. So I have another question for you. It's a big one. Curious your thoughts on this. So why don't we see all cattlemen using cover crops? What's the biggest barrier?
I don't know. I as agriculturists out here, by nature, we're cheap. It's a cost, and a lot of folks, I think anyway, just have a hard time seeing the payback off of it. Whether it's just the strict, we've got farms that we cover crop that we don't even, they're strictly a cover crop. That's all they are. We see the benefit of that. And until you do, sometimes it's hard to step out of the box and try it a little bit. But, for me, especially in a cow-calf operation, knowing, I have firsthand knowledge of the costs. I got to figure out ways to cut that. And every day I cut that, if I'm saving a couple bucks or $1.50 a head a day, you start multiplying that by your herd by days, it's real money. So it doesn't take long to pay back. It's just, I think there's probably some leap of faith to it for some folks that, and that's the beauty of this deal that we do out here, is everybody could do their own thing. But I personally think there's better ways to do it, or ways that work well.
Zach, so when you got started with cover crops, did you have an incentive? Like, did you get the cost share from NRCS and that like got you to do that, or?
No, we did not. And I will say we do participate in some crop shares, some cost share deals today. First and foremost, I mean, it's out there, and that helped us expand what we were doing. So our home ground, right around our base of our operation, it's tremendously productive dirt, but it's also erodible. And you go cut corn silage off of it, it's highly erodible. You best get something out there. I know some folks don't. I see the value in it right there. But that was our first deal, and let's face it, in 2012 there was money floating around in the farm economy. So it wasn't a big deal to go spend another $35 an acre on it. And then, and then it started clicking, well, hey, we can run cattle on this. And then we saw the benefit of it, because hay was expensive at that point. Hay was very expensive at that point. And then when we were able to graze those cattle till, January 1st or whatever the exact date was, I mean, the payback was phenomenal. I mean, it was probably more money back in than the actual crop raised. But yes,
Zach,
we do the cost shares today. Yes.
Okay. Zach and Bronson, I don't think you've tried this, Bronson, but have you planted any summer annuals, high energy summer annuals like sorghum Sudan?
No. The only summer annual I've planted is teff grass, but it wasn't really for cover crop purpose. It was just for hay.
And Zach, have you tried that?
We did this year. We put out Sudan grass on a pretty decent amount of acres. I was just looking to try something different. Kind of got talking with a couple guys around, and my seed guy, and he located me some seed, and it was so cheap I couldn't hardly turn it down. So what we did is we planted that about the 6th or 7th of June after we got cattle off, and we'd baled some rye, and I kept running the numbers and coming back to my expenses were so much less. And I'm like, well, we can take a chance on it. And we actually chopped that. We windrowed it and chopped it. And I'd let it go too long, but my kids had 4-H and fair and everything going on. And it didn't work out that we didn't do it till it was the first week of August, I guess, that we chopped it. It was taller than my tractor. It was hard to windrow. And we chopped it, and then we get to doing the math on the loads, and we were already in the profit right there, and that stuff started growing back. So I windrowed it probably, I don't know, 6-8 inches high, so it had a chance to grow back, and sprayed it with a shot of 2,4-D. We had some weeds coming in it, and I gave it a little shot of nitrogen, but we didn't get any rain. I mean, they were calling for rain the day we sprayed it, and we just didn't get it. But we got another bale point, I don't know, maybe 1.2 to the acre off of it after that in September, and it was dry because we were in a terrible drought. and we're gonna do it again. My plan B for that this year was probably had a few more cows running around than I really had grass, and then their things were drying out, so we were actually just going to turn the cows out on it and let them graze it. You know, probably section it off a little bit so they didn't flatten it, but it just worked out this year that, you know, we did end up with enough feed, so we were all right that way. And baled it, sampled it here the other day, and I mean, the stuff's 18%, 18.4% protein, I think is what my feed sample come back at. And the TDN's in the mid 50s. I mean, it's pretty good stock cow hay is what it's going to amount to. We're going to do it again. Probably try to manage it a little more intensively this time. And I don't know if we'll chop it or just wet bale it, and then we can always grind it later if we need to. But dollars wise, it was more profitable than my corn silage, and my corn silage was, you know, we collected a little insurance on it because of the drought, but the corn silage we still had a good yield with corn silage, but my inputs were so much higher. You know, you got over, I don't know, we're at $120 or $30 an acre in fertilizer costs, and you know that's accounting for the spreading cost of our cattle manure goes on it. We generally don't buy P&K. But then the seed costs, you know, I mean, you're looking at over $100 an acre in seed costs with, you know, smart stacks and a pretty high rate. It gets pretty expensive, and, you know, no crop insurance right there come $22 off the top. And it just worked pretty good for us. And I really think if the guy's got some patches that maybe tie in with a pasture or, you know, right close to his building site where he's got some lots, I think that for a summer deal looks incredible to me. And also going back to what Bronson's thinking about doing, there's no reason even in the spring or with some summer annuals to wet bale some of that rye and or do sorghum and wet bale that at a smaller height, you know, try to get it around maybe 3 feet tall. You can feed that to those cows in the winter. It's wet feed. You got to remember that. I mean, you're feeding them a lot of water. You got to weigh that out. But that might be a way to tie the whole year in to creating feed and raising cattle back off at great, you know, pounds of beef.
So another question related to the sorghum is baling it about like corn stalks? Is there any special consideration if you want to make large rounds?
So we planned on wet baling the sorghum that we did this summer. That was our intent. We windrowed it, left it fairly tight so that it'd be easier to rake, and it just worked out. It was so dry right there, and the wind was blowing, and the stuff got dry. So we just ended up raking it with a regular old double wheel rake and baled it up. Doing our rye, it can be a little tough to rake sometimes depending on how wet it is. Generally, like if we're going to wet bale it, we're going to windrow it, you know, one afternoon and be raking it the next morning, because it's usually a little thinner because cattle been on it. They've taken your population down a little bit, but generally we can get most of it raked up all right and not have to put so much downforce on the rake that you're dragging all the dirt and the old corn stalks and everything, and it'll be fairly clean. And a deal like that, the way I look at it, it's gravy feed. So if I got to leave some of it out there, give it back to the ground. It's fine.
Zach, and a clarification on that. When you say wet baling, you mean making baleage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. 50% moisture, maybe somewhere in there. Just it's a moving target. Depends on the weather.
Okay. Another question. When have you planted wheat instead of rye? Or have you done that?
The biggest reason we've done it is for one, cost. One of my seed suppliers come across a bunch of clean, just bin run wheat that was dirt cheap. I'm like, let's try it. You know, it's just, you know, we'll save $7 an acre or whatever it was. It was a pretty big savings. It's definitely not as aggressive, in my opinion, anyway. I think it comes down to your goals. You know, is this strictly a cover? You know, I don't see any reason why you can't kind of mix the two up. Yeah, here a couple of years ago, he come up with a bunch of it, and rye was getting a little hard to get a hold of here locally. You know, that's gotten better here the last couple of years. You know, more even just your Pioneer seed dealer down the road, he's probably dealing a little of it because he sees some value and he's got folks doing it. So the more people that are raising it, there's getting to be. I've talked to several people here locally that are going to be raising some for next year. You know, try to raise some of their own seed. And if they can peddle, you know, 200-300 bushels or whatever the amount is, well, good. So, you know, hopefully that'll stay on the increase, I guess. Hopefully I'll drive the cost of the seed down a little bit, but we're getting, you know, we've got some good suppliers in the state too. So that helps.
And Zach, have you ever, or have you thought about raising your own seed?
We've thought about it. It's kind of a leap of faith. You know, where my best stands generally are is where we want to cut a little feed, and I got to turn the dollars on that. I've got some lower productivity kind of ground that we may try a little of it here. I don't know that it'll be this year, but you know, seed it a little heavier, and then you know the management. I'm pretty green on the management of it, raising it for seed. I mean, I know you need to fungicide it and do some things that way for some feed to get the quality up, you know, get a good germ out of it. And you know, why not try a little, you know, 10 acres maybe or whatever, you know, that combine's probably sitting in the shed anyway, just wanting something to do. So, you know, you know, for a lot of folks, it'd be a nice little summer deal that, you know, take a couple of days and go cut a little and, you know, maybe you bale up the straw or maybe you don't, maybe you just cut it high and leave it.
So we have, go ahead, Bronson, if you.
I was just going to say, have you guys ever considered, or would you consider trying 60-inch corn to try to get some more growth out of your cover crops?
Personally, I'd like to see some more. I've seen some really cool stuff coming on it. And I always like to say that I'm not the first adopter, but I'd like to be an early enough adopter. But if some of the first results that I'm seeing are as good and can be replicated going ahead here, I'm willing to try it. Probably not on a huge basis because at the end of the day, you know, you see the stuff that happened at your farm and the guy up the road's farm, but until it happens on your farm and affects your checkbook and you get comfortable with it, it's, you know, it takes me a little bit to get over that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, something I considered was, you know, if you have the cattle there to utilize it, you know, if your corn flops and, you know, your cover crops would probably have enough growth to make up for it maybe, but, you know, who knows? It may both flop.
I think you're right, because sometimes we get so hung up on it's, you know, dollars per bushel and how many bushels do we raise and minus our expenses. That's it. Sometimes if you look at the whole picture, you know, the dollars per acre that you create is not just about the grain or the hay that you raised or whatever else it is. It's what you do in the off season with that. You know, you run some cattle on it. Well, back figure what that was worth. You know, that's direct profit to your operation.
Yep.
So we have an attendee who kind of explained his scenario. So he says he lives in an area with very little pasture ground and very few cow-calf herds. With no access to summer pasture, what would be the best way to start incorporating cattle grazing?
Does he have row crops?
I'm guessing so.
Cattle move a long ways in this world. I've got a set of cows right now that they'll run down around Unionville, Missouri this summer. They just moved an hour here to get to here, and you know, freight is expensive. There's no way around that. Freight costs money, but for one, maybe start reaching out a little further than just what you think is your only local folks, but you know, again, maybe start small. You know, you've got to have a place to catch them. You got to have a lot or a set of corrals or whatever. And if that's at your home base, well, why not section off a little bit around that? I mean, it's probably worth a try. And then again, start small. You know, maybe it's just with some light calves. You know, find some light calves and you can turn them out, but you got to remember that you got to have plan B. So if that feed's gone, either the cattle got to leave or you got to bring some feed in.
So a follow-up to that, what resources are you using to find guys willing to ship cattle around?
I'm a sale barn junkie, so I mean, we sit in a lot of sale barns. Either me or my brother, or just it's no different than practical farmers. It's the cattle business and the livestock business they're small worlds. And everybody talks. You start talking. Talk to your feed guy, talk to your banker, hit a couple sale barns, figure out who's active, and the worst they're going to say is no. I mean, you don't let your pride take that away, but you've got a good resource here with practical farmers, and then the grazing exchange. There's some pretty good Twitter, Facebook, new ag talk. There's a lot of things, and I've found that most folks are generally pretty willing to share, and don't think you're out there just step on their toes. So they're willing to share a little bit and say, well, here's a guy maybe you can call, and if he doesn't know somebody, chances are he knows somebody. And you kind of just keep working at it, and it's no different than renting a farm when you're trying to get started. You're gonna get told no a lot, and there's gonna be failure on it, and you just got to find it in you to keep at it and keep plugging at it. Sale barn operators are a huge resource. Because you think of the sale barn that's local to you, they know everybody. Or everybody that's in the livestock business, I should say. So they know who's got cattle and things like that, and they're a good resource. They really are. And most of chances are, if they're going to send a set, or help Bronson find a set of cows to run or a set of calves to run, well, they got to have a pretty good shot at selling those calves again. So they got some financial interest in there and helping him out. Feed guy's the same way. He wants to sell a little feed or some mineral or whatever else. Your local hay jock be another good one.
So Zach, are you going to just local sale barns, or how far away do you go to sales?
So we use order buyers as well, but the bulk of the cattle in our operation come from, say, the Highway 30 corridor to the Missouri line. I got a set in last night, came out of central Nebraska. And again, the cattle business is a big business. But it's a small business when it gets right down to the people involved in it. So, I like the local calves. We got some of the best producers in the state. They do a great job with their calves, and they've improved their genetics, and their health protocols are good. Their vets are doing a good job helping them out, and there's good stock. There's poor stock everywhere. I mean, you can go to the middle of Montana, and I can find you a set of poor calves. I'll guarantee you. But as a whole, I like these local calves and local cows. Most folks really do a nice job.
Thanks, Zach. That's really helpful. So I have a question for Bronson. Bronson, after listening to Zach and learning from him, what do you think is your first step?
Well, probably like he said, the best thing to do would be to find a local, neighbor that wants to run some on cover crops. Would be the easiest step towards it, I guess. I've been kind of taking steps as we go anyways. It's just the way things come about. We just don't get everything done in a year. So, but yeah, I mean, that'd be the first thing to try, I guess. Just get somebody that's also interested in doing it, and get some out there and just try some. Find 100 acres to throw some electric fence on, and put 50 cows out there for something for the winter. And if they run out of feed or it doesn't work, then take them out and try, like you said, go to plan B. So
Cool. Thanks. And I have a question for Zach. Zach, what's your 5-year plan for cover crops and more grazing and contract grazing, or what does that look like?
I see it growing as we go ahead. This year, drought, water was pretty limited on a lot of farms here locally. We rely on a lot of live water. One of my goals I've been thinking about here the past few days actually is I've got some fence that I think we're going to go ahead and build some permanent fence on some, not the whole farm, but some stretches of it. And then we need to develop more water. I just think, whether there's some old shallow wells around that a lot of folks they probably shouldn't be there, but if they're usable, we need to figure out, some solar pumps, continuous flow systems, or developing some tile line waters. That I think that would be a big step for us to be able to not have to worry about that. Then it's just, let's get the wires up and get the cattle moved. So, in my mind, I think we can do that. And personally, I'd like to be running more of my own cattle. The contract side of it's nice of it, but it's cash flow and low risk, basically. I mean, you're not going to, or personally, I'm not going to tie in with somebody that I have a question whether I'm going to get paid or not. Always, it can happen, I guess. But as I look at it, I see a lot of opportunities with cows, and I think there's more room in this state for cows than a lot of folks realize. We have so much feed in the state. You ask a guy from Wyoming and they're jealous of us, with what we have for the off-season grazing. The grass is one thing that you have a place to run them from May to October, November. It's the rest of the year that we can cheapen up our costs and be more cost competitive probably than a lot of places, And I understand that, our ground is so productive, whether it's northern Iowa or southern Iowa, there's folks that, Bronson's probably got a farm in his neighborhood that would never want to farm because he thinks it's too poor. But the guy from central Missouri thinks it's way better than what he's got. So, that tells me that we have the ability to grow feed and, do some things with these cows. And I'm not personally a huge fan of confinement cows, in a hoop barn or whatever, but I don't see why a combination couldn't work. A smaller footprint for the cows as a whole, but you're rotating through some summer annuals, and they're running out on rye in the spring and then running on corn stalks through the winter with some rye or whatever else you got mixed in there. I think it could be a really good way to do things. Again, you still got to have plan B. So you still got to raise feed or have the ability to get feed when you need it, though.
So Zach, a couple infrastructure questions. Like you talk about thinking about putting in more perimeter fence and developing watering systems. Would you reach out to NRCS for financial help on that?
Depends. What else do I got to do? What are the caveats that go along with a grazing or, setting up a winter deal? I mean, does it got to be all brand new? Because, that's the thing on some of those equip contracts and things like that, you've got to use all brand new materials. Well, like I said, I'm a sale barn junkie. So, and I like going farm sales too. And well, there's a lot of days you can pick up fence posts for half price or less, and braces and wire. That's perfectly fine. So, again, you got to weigh out your costs, but, if it's right next to your house and you want a brand new fence, we'll build a brand new fence and just we'll let them help you pay for it. I mean, if the money's there, you've got to figure out how to use it. It's there for a reason.
So to follow up on that, someone asked how expensive to set up a good water system. I know it depends.
How in depth do you want to go? So, ours that we did, that's out in the middle of it's a 90 CSR ridge, and there's a water tank right in the middle of it. It's a what is it, 18 or 20 foot square concrete pad. I sunk a 30 or a 24-inch tile, double insulated tile down it, and my neighbor came over with his backhoe, gave him $100, and I plumbed it, but he dug the hole for me and then formed it up, and whatever your concrete's costing, and I slapped a tank right on top of it with an automatic float, and that's it. I used wood tank heaters to keep them open. We haven't hardly used them this year. We just cut the little ice, and then the warm water coming in from underneath. We'll keep it thawed out all day, and it doesn't have to be terribly expensive. Now, if you want to go talk about a heated, high-dollar plastic tank and everything that goes along with it, and running electricity, 100 yards out in the field, that can get pretty expensive pretty quick. I like overflow waters. Tile line waters don't have to be expensive. You can do them for, I don't know, $500-600. I would do it, I would tend to think. Again, you got to kind of protect the ground around it, though, because that's a high use area. And I mean, as well as I do, if you got 100 cows drinking the same water tank every day, they're going to make a hole. So that concrete, kind of buffers that, or use some rock and some textile fabric. You'll be all right.
Sarah Carlson throws an idea out here. So she says there's more and more interest by protein companies to get animals out of company-owned feedlots for just a couple months. What if we in Iowa offered more months of winter grazing so those mega feedlots can get animals on more grass?
I don't see why that's not an option. I really don't. It comes down to the guy that wants to do it, though. You know, you've got to want to go out and deal with livestock every day. You know, there's going to be days where they're out for whatever reason, and there's going to be a storm you got to deal with. But I see that as a definitely a potential income stream for a farmer somewhere that, you know, you tie in with one of them, and, you know, whether that means you're straightening them out and then turning them out, and then they head on out to wherever, Colorado or Kansas or wherever they got to go. I don't see why you couldn't do a little of that. And, you know, they should be pretty happy with it too. Should be getting a pretty good product to handle at their feed yard.
So, Zach, I'm curious your thoughts on virtual fence. Like, I don't know how much you've heard about it, but you know, they're in other countries, in Australia and Scandinavia, they use like ear tags or collars on cows, and it's all virtual, and you can move the fence from your iPhone.
I think it's a cool thing that I want to see it firsthand to see that it works. And I also probably have my question, you know, what's going to happen with a snaky old limousine cross cow with pitchfork antlers? Is she going to respect that? You know, but what a great way to do it if in fact it is as effective as it could be. You know, and if you got to handle your cows anyway, well, you know, let's get the cows pregged after we wean calves, and let's go ahead and throw the collar or whatever makes them respect that. Let's put that on them, and then, you know, the spring after the calve or whatever, pull it off before they go to their summer grazing. I don't see why it couldn't work fantastically. Set of yearling calves might be another story, though. They sometimes have a mind of their own.
I've heard that in trials that when cows get spooked, or if, you know, if they're just spooky animals, that they'll just run right through it. And that, I mean, that's just like a huge flaw in the system.
Might be a good place though for you know, a purebred breeder. Generally their cows tend to be very, very gentle. Or a guy that just takes really good care and spends a lot of times with his cows. They're going to be gentle. I mean,
Definitely.
that's the nature of it. You know, he's throwing them a bucket of feed every third day or something, and they just love him and he loves them. Well, they're probably going to respect fences a little better, or a situation like that.
Or at the very least, virtual fence could be first used as internal fence where there is large swaths of perimeter fence.
Yeah, maybe you could section it up a little bit and manage it a little tighter.
For better management.
High intensive grazing or something with it,
exactly.
maybe.
So we can rest grasses better.
Or
yeah,
like
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be the first to know when we figure out how to get it in Iowa.
I mean, is there anybody in there? So there's nobody in Iowa that's doing it.
There's been some tries, like there's been some asks to bring it here, but no, not that I know of. There's nobody actually using virtual fence. I've heard of a goat farmer in Minnesota who's using like an invisible fence system, like for dogs, where you don't actually have to bury it. It's just through satellite. And trying those dog collars on goats. So, and I think that's being used on BLM land out west, where they just have like, you know, miles and miles and miles of land to use it on. So it just doesn't make as much financial sense on the small land holdings we have in comparison.
Sure.
So anyway, fun to think about though. I do think like in the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to become a thing. So
look how much everything changes so fast as it is now. You know, we never figured we'd have. Look at us having a meeting like this today.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other big thing is like using drones to herd cattle now. Yeah. So anyway, that is the end of our discussion, guys. And I just want to thank you two so much for going back and forth and just answering a ton of questions and providing all of this knowledge. And Bronson, best of luck to you getting started in this endeavor. We know livestock integration is important.